I'm Wilson Lai.
I'm Benjamin Yap.
I'm Eli Sands.
And I'm Andrew Ahn.
You're listening to Deep Cut.
On Deep Cut, we compare a director's most popular film with a personal favorite chosen by one of us.
We also discuss a director's life and career to bring context that helps us view their movies as they may want us to.
If you're enjoying the show, please remember to give us a rating and subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts, as this will help others discover the show. On Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review for the show or comment on our episodes directly on Spotify. You can keep up with us at Deep Cut Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd, and on TikTok at deepcutpod_film. If you want to talk about this movie with us, please drop us a message in our Discord server. For big fans of the show, we also have a Patreon if you want to help support us. You can subscribe for free to get some exclusive content that's only on Patreon. You can click the link in our description or go to deepcutpod.com to find our Patreon, Discord, and all the other socials that we've mentioned here. This is a very, very special episode that we have for you today, where we are talking to Andrew Ahn. We previously talked to Andrew about Jonathan Glazer's Birth on episode 18, really, really early on in our podcast careers, and also interviewed him for his previous feature, which was Fire Island, and you can check that out. That is episode 45. Andrew Ahn is a director of these really intimate and heartfelt queer dramas that have developed now into queer rom-coms. And we are very happy and excited to be talking to him about his newest film, which is a reimagining of the 1993 classic, The Wedding Banquet.
Which is directed by Ang Lee, if you didn't know.
Andrew's 2025 update of The Wedding Banquet centers on two queer couples living in Seattle. Chris and Min, and Angela and Lee. Both couples are on the cusp of a big change in their relationship. Frustrated with his commitment-phobic boyfriend Chris and running out of time, Min makes a proposal. A green card marriage with their friend Angela in exchange for her partner Lee's expensive IVF. Elopement plans are upended, however, when Min's grandmother surprises them with an extravagant Korean wedding banquet. Starring Bowen Yang, Lily Gladstone, Kelly Marie Tran, Han Gi-chan, Joan Chen, and Yuh-jung. The Wedding Banquet is a joyful comedy of errors about a chosen family navigating cultural identity, queerness, and family expectations.
So what did you guys think of the film?
I really enjoyed watching how Andrew, as well as James Schamus, who co-wrote the original, kind of update this for the current context of what queer people are living through in this day and age. And I found that to be very refreshing and very, very timely. And I guess watching Andrew's career covering queer stories, you can kind of see the trajectory of where these stories are going. And like also for Andrew, what is on his mind as a queer person living in this time and growing up in the last decade that he's been making movies. So I really like to see that. And it's very funny and the performances are great. It's got an insane cast of characters and many of these actors being allowed to stretch the acting muscles in different capacities, which is really nice to see. And I love that Andrew kind of gave them this space to do that.
Entirely agreed, Ben. It's very touching and down to earth and warm in a way that feels entirely connected to Andrew's three previous features. He so clearly cares about his collaborators and his characters, and it just comes through in every moment here. It's really a delight and very touching, very moving. I deeply enjoyed watching The Wedding Banquet.
Well, surprise, surprise, I agree with both of you. I think this film is so lovely. I think we're so lucky to receive this film early as well.
Yeah.
Because I got to watch my screener 2 times before talking to Andrew. And I think on a rewatch, it's so fantastic. I think the intricate plotting of the film really aid to deliver these really incredible performances by these 4 leads of the film that are only supported by these legends of Asian American cinema, Joan Chen and Yuh-jung. And I'm just so happy for Andrew that he was able to deliver this really incredible film. And like I say in my Letterboxd review, I just hope he makes 100 more of these. It's just so heartwarming and really, really, please go catch this in the theater. I'm so happy we're done with the recording. So I didn't forget, because we're putting this at the start of the episode. Go to the theater and catch this movie when it comes out near you.
It is coming out on April 18, 2025 in the United States, and for other territories, you'll find out, but keep a lookout.
Before we go into our interview with Andrew Ahn, please be warned that we'll be going in depth, and this will be a very much spoiler-filled discussion of the film and the original Ang Lee movie. If you don't mind the spoilers, however, or if you've already seen Andrew Ahn's The Wedding Banquet, feel free to listen on.
I will say that I don't think this is one of those spoilable movies. Like, it's more about the warmth of the embrace that you get from just being in this movie. And there's no spoiling that experience. I really do think
that is very true.
You should go see it. Go see it.
And without further ado, here is our interview with Andrew Ahn. Today is a very special day because we are joined by director Andrew Ahn. Andrew has been with us previously talking about Birth, which is episode 18, and we also interviewed him for his previous feature, Fire Island, which is episode 45. He is here today to talk to us about his remake or reimagining of Ang Lee and James Schamus's 1993 film, The Wedding Banquet. Welcome, Andrew. Thank you for joining us again on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I can't believe this is my third time. And like, so cool that, there's so many episodes. I didn't realize like 1845, it's cool.
Yeah, we're hitting 100 real soon.
Yeah, this one will be close to 100 when it comes out.
Amazing.
Yeah, and it's nice that you've been with us from like almost near the beginning.
True.
Very, very happy to be here. And there are so few folks that I feel like I could have this conversation with. So I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, I think it's been really particularly incredible to be just tracking your career, but also like checking in with you in person these past few years and seeing your career progress from these smaller indie features to these bigger rom-coms with Fire Island and now with The Wedding Banquet. I was just saying to the guys that I feel like so proud that you've like sort of made it, and this film has a theatrical release and it's like super exciting.
It's pretty wild. Like, I remember after my first feature, Spa Night, just really doubting whether or not I could have a career making films about queer people, about Asian American people. And somehow through 4 features, I've done that. And that feels really meaningful. But yeah, I just, I'm so happy that I'm able to make these films and have more and more people see them. I could not have fathomed it,
And I guess when you were starting out, like Asian American films were still like kind of budding in that scene, right? And you were part of that wave that was kind of increasing the representation on screen as well.
Yeah, it's kind of annoying to put it this way, but like Spa Night was like pre-Crazy Rich Asians, and there definitely was a legacy of Asian American film, which I was aware of, and The Wedding Banquet was definitely part of that, right? And so it didn't necessarily feel like I was breaking new ground, but things definitely have changed since. I think there's more interest, there's more desire to see Asian American films, to have a more diverse American independent film culture. But yeah, it's a very difficult thing to kind of put into context sometimes, and I just feel very thankful.
Well, we likewise are thankful. I'll leap in and say that I loved your reimagining of The Wedding Banquet. It felt of a piece with your other films in that I very quickly got a sense of who the people were, and just watching them open up and blossom over the course of the movie felt of a piece with Fire Island, with Driveways, with Spa Night. It just made sense. And one of the things that we were talking about beforehand to build off of Wilson is that we feel like you've been able to carry through those consistent themes and threads across your movies as you've leveled up. Like, how easy or hard has it been to carry through those things? Like, have you met pushback?
It's a really good question. I think I'm constantly having to really listen to my creative instincts. And sometimes that can be really hard to do when you have so much else involved in the process of making a film, whether it's the market, whether it's pressure from investors. There's just a lot of business to think about in how something gets made because film is such an expensive medium, right? I had a really wonderful conversation early in my career with Ira Sachs, and he said, film is a very uncomfortable balance between art and commerce. And I realize as I've grown in my career that the reason that balance is uncomfortable is because it's actually rather imbalanced. It's, at a certain level, filmmaking is more business than it is art. And so to try and maintain a certain creative point of view, personal artistic voice, you really do have to push back against what might make a project feel just more commercial. And it's a constant kind of negotiation and navigation because I also am aware that if I only prioritized the art, then my films probably would not get made, right? And so how do you balance those things? But I'm very thankful for wonderful producers who can kind of help in that navigation and people who really champion filmmaker-driven movies. It's an interesting game to play, but I have, I think, a tolerance for it, And I'm really proud of the work that I've made, and hopefully will allow other filmmakers to make more personal films in order to, just have like a more nuanced, more equitable cinematic landscape.
You mentioned the producers that you worked with, and this is the second collaboration that you're having with Bowen Yang, but also the first collaboration with James Schamus. And I'm sure that partnership was useful in navigating that balance between art and commerce. We, amongst the three of us, were messaging a bit about the Wedding Banquet as a reinterpretation of the themes and focuses of the original movie. And maybe this is our segue into the original movie, but I would love to hear about that process of working off of the original text with James Schamus.
Yeah, I love the original film. I rewatched it in preparation for this, and it's been a moment since I've rewatched it, and it's so beautiful. It's so good.
Yes.
I've talked about this previously. My first encounter with The Wedding Banquet was when it came out in 1993. My family and I were at a video rental store, and my mom saw the VHS for it and was like, this is that movie with Asian people that white people are watching. Like, we should see what it's about. Because it was actually very well received. Like, the film was in the culture, but she didn't know that it was a queer film. And we watched it at home, and as like a nascent gay boy, it really made an impact on me. It's like, I can't remember any other movie that I saw when I was that age. And so that, even if I wasn't super conscious of it, I knew subconsciously that like, this is meaningful. And looking back on that experience, it's like, that was the first gay film I saw. And the fact that it was a gay Asian American film, and that it was a film that portrayed queer people with a sense of humanity. Like, I'm so fortunate that that was my first example. And so in many ways, it set me on a path that has made me the filmmaker that I am, has made me the person that I am. And for those reasons, I did not want to make this reimagining. You know, it's so much pressure. It's so significant. But yeah, I, in the adaptation with James, just had to think about the humanity of these characters and the way that they were treated in Ahng's movie and really let them lead the story, have it feel as character driven as the original. And there were certain plot things that we felt like were helpful in kind of tying it to Ahng's version. But again, it was less about the plot and it was more about these human beings and their desires. We knew that we had to have a wedding banquet because I'm Korean. We decided to make it Korean, And so, there are just certain things that were easy foundational blocks to put into place. And then there was a lot of iteration, a lot of conversation about kind of how to grow these characters' lives. But yeah, it was a long process. Our producer, Anita Guo, who had the rights to the original, had approached James Schamus and Joe Pirro about a remake back in 2019.
Wow.
And James, Joe, and I had worked on Driveways together, and James suggested Anita talk to me. And so we spoke at Sundance 2019, and it took me a moment to feel comfortable with the idea and develop a pitch. That approached Anita, a few weeks later, and was very thankful that she was excited by it, and we moved forward together. But that was 6 years ago.
Wow.
What was in that original pitch?
Yeah, I'm curious.
What was the Ahn sauce that you put on it to update it for 30 years later?
Yeah, so there were a few things. One of the obvious kind of differences was that now gay people can get married in the US. And so why would you fake a straight wedding? What would the situation have to be? And I thought a lot about queer people in my generation where now that we can get married, do we want to? And should we? And the kind of burden of choice. And so that was an element of the story that I was really interested in. The other part of it was thinking about, what if instead of an accidental baby, there's a gay couple that wants to have a baby, and what are the challenges of that? And one of the inspirations for the film is a conversation that I had with my boyfriend where I mentioned I wanted to have children and he wasn't so sure. And he said, well, if it happens, it happens. And I was like, no, it doesn't. Not for gay people. We can't whoopsie daisy our way into happening to have a baby, And that made me realize that for queer people, any sort of hesitation about having children can become a giant obstacle, because you have to be so intentional about it. And so that became an element of the story. And maybe it's a little simplistic, but I was just thinking about the original film, and I was like, well, you have Yuh-jung and Simon. What if Wei Wei was also gay?
Yeah.
What if she had a partner? So I just was trying to make more people queer. And so, again, there were kind of these blocks that I felt excited by, and actually a lot has changed since that original pitch to Anita. The first versions of this screenplay had the characters going to Korea and Taiwan, Angela's mom was a marshal of the Taipei Pride. That was kind of And then we had to make the movie for less money, you know? So, like, not an international jet-setting movie. But yeah, like the process of writing with James and the development process with the producers was all trying to kind of distill, really clarify what are the modern day conversations that queer people are having about family, how to grow family.
Yeah. I really loved the ways that this film updated or changed what was in the original Wedding Banquet. And I think one of the things that I loved the most about it was that the focus was shifted away from that sort of generational gap between elders who were maybe a little homophobic or not accepting of gay people to in your film where what I was expecting when watching it was when Min's grandmother came that she'd be super anti this wedding. But when she was like, oh, I knew you were gay all along. Like, how are you sleeping with this woman? Like, let's just have this wedding for your grandfather. It shifted the dramatic drive of the original film towards the relationship dramas between these two couples. And I thought that was the biggest change, I guess, emotionally for me. But I think it really works. Like, it really works in this day and age for queer people.
Yeah, you know, I love the original film. And I'd say that the original film really does feel like a father-son story, right? That's kind of the heart of it. And I think the kind of parent-child stuff is still a part of this reimagining, but I did want to shift it a little. Like, I did want to start to kind of pull the focus forward the generations, you know, to the point where it's like I want to meet the babies. You know? Like, I want this to be about the future, you know, about this next generation. And so that was a kind of philosophical choice made in just kind of, where the center of the story is. So much of what I was trying to do was not really remake the original and actually just kind of tell the next story, right? And that for me was partially because I have different concerns now as a queer person than someone would in the 90s. And also selfishly, like, I just didn't want people to be able to like do direct comparisons because, you know, Ahn is a master filmmaker. But yeah, like, I really wanted to have this film stand on its own and have its own reason for being. And I think a lot of that was this early choice to shift the generational focus, who and what we're kind of spending time on.
Well, not to invite more comparison between the two films, but you're mentioning the building blocks on the script side that you chose to pull forward or leave behind. On the directorial side, was there anything formally or stylistically in Ang Lee's playbook or even his editing style that influenced how you shaped The Wedding Banquet?
Yeah, you know, I think Ang's directorial vision in The Wedding Banquet, it's so human, right? It's so character focused. And so that was really important to me that we maintain that. I did have certain instincts about how it might be different. I wanted there to be a little more chaos in a way in this film because I feel like the characters are kind of disasters. You know, like they're, you know, having a hard time, you know, and I wanted that reflected in the filmmaking. I think there was so much to be inspired by. But again, I was very careful not to copy, you know, and instead it was just kind of understanding the philosophy in which the original was made and being able to adapt that for these new characters.
I'm curious how often you were coming back to the film as a touchstone. Because I feel like if I was remaking something and I was like trying to change it up, I would only like watch it at the start and then never come back to it until I'm done with the film.
No, it's a good point. I mean, I've seen the film so many times because, again, I love it. And so I had a very a strong sense of at least like an overall experience. Then, of course, as we were writing, there were reasons to watch back certain scenes. But it's true, at some point, you have to stop watching and you have to really find the spirit of the film that you're making. And so I didn't go back after a certain point, at least not to like watch the entire film, maybe just to look at certain things, sequences or scenes. But yeah, like, I mean, honestly, it's hard for me when I'm directing in pre-production and production to watch any movie, you know, because it can just kind of mess with your head a little. It's difficult to just stay focused on your film. And so I was really trying to find the spirit of this movie with my collaborators. I find that process really fun and really inspiring. And so that's something that I did do very consciously. I've since watched the movie and, you know, like rewatched The Wedding Banquet. And I will say, I don't know if I ever want to see a double feature of The Wedding Banquets, because I just wonder what that would be like. But
That's what I did yesterday.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Which order?
I did 93 first and then 25 afterwards. And I'd seen the Ang Lee version a few years ago. So revisiting it was fun. But I was picking up on like all, like they're just like very, very different movies. Like I think they have very different dramatic concerns. The tonal balance is different. So I fully believe that your film really stands on its own and like people are able to like just take it as its own thing, which is really great because I can't really say that about a lot of remakes of films. Yeah.
A lot of remakes is always a question of like, why are you remaking it? And I think you do a really fine job of being like, oh, this is a good reason to remake it, to update it for 30 years in the future, where queer people's lives have already changed and the context has really changed. And as I was watching, and I was like, oh, what parts of it are inspired from the original? It's like a bunch of plot points, but in general, it's really about completely new characters with completely new concerns, which is very refreshing and very useful for this generation, I feel.
I'm very, very happy to hear that. You know, I think I was very driven by my own concerns as a gay man and thinking about family. And so that I could always go back to that creatively to give this film a reason for being. And so that as a North Star in the process, I think really helped me out just because the legacy of the original.
I have something that's nagging me. So, okay, Ang Lee's film, the ending scene, right? They're like dropping off the dad at the airport. And the last shot of this film is him going to the security agent and he like raises his hands. I was just wondering what you thought of that or what everyone thought of that. Cause I'm like, what does this mean? As like an ending shot that he fades out from and he goes to credits. Like, what does that mean?
I mean, I love that ending because there's something so kind of complicating about it, right? It's such an odd moment. I have to ask, what are your thoughts?
What's your nagging feeling, Wilson?
Well, I'm just trying to like crack the code, but because it sort of looks like he's like, oh, becoming free, right? Like he's like raising his arms to get security checked. But I was also like just thinking about this is a pre 9/11 world, and I'm like can't like keep on like airport security. But that's of course 100% not what Ang Lee wants you to feel.
He didn't know.
The whole thing was a TSA ad.
No, I mean, I love that ending. And actually, of these three movies from Ang Lee's trilogy, I love the way he ends all of his movies here because he goes for an extremely open-ended ending. The story is ended in the movie, but he ends it on such a kind of like a lilting note rather than like a punctuation kind of note. He like lives move on. And even though the wedding banquet of this is really wrapped up, that story is wrapped up, we don't know what's going on in Dad's head completely. We don't really know where things are going. We don't know where things are going to go with whether they find out that the father knows this whole time. There's a lot of question marks that he ends his films on. He does the same with Eating Men, Women, as well as Pushing Hands, right? Like he just lets them just go rather than like really punctuating it, which I really, really like.
There's also the specter of the father's potential imminent death hovering over the whole movie, right? That whole part where he walks into the room and sees his father asleep and puts in an incredibly tender and like kind of shocking gesture to me. He puts his finger under his father's nose to check for breath.
Yeah, that's a crazy moment.
Yeah.
I guess from what you're saying, Eli, it's almost like saying, what if this is the last time he sees
Yes,
his father?
exactly.
Which is very possible.
Yeah.
Right. And it's this bloody image of him just going through TSA, like the most uninteresting last way to see your father. Right.
I mean, there's been papers written about this, right? And that kind of final image. And I do really love that there's a gesture, the kind of arms being raised, and whether that's a gesture of freedom, or I almost read it as kind of like relenting, like I've done what I can. There's something about it that it makes you read the film. Is there like a poetry to it that the plot or the comedy has kind of distracted you from, but then, is there something else happening? And I think it allows an audience to then kind of reflect on what they've watched. I fought very hard for my ending on this one as just a kind of wink to the original. But I agree with you, Ben, that there's something about that ending in the original Wedding Banquet and something that I really love in films and have tried to put in my films, this idea that these characters' lives continue outside of the vessel of this movie, that these are real people that we as an audience now have to say goodbye to, and their lives will continue, which I think is the most like beautiful way to think about these characters, right? Like not as like puppets that only exist for your observation. And so, I think it's such a fascinating, beautiful ending for me that I know a lot of people that are like, what is that? Like, why? Like, why couldn't you just end on the three of them on the other end of the tunnel? Like, I do also love that observation that is this the last time that, they'll see his dad? And I love that it's shot from behind as if it's their point of view. Yeah, there's something really subliminal about that ending, which I think is, so fun to talk about.
I think our four interpretations say a lot about us. Andrew, the poetry of human connection and empathy. Wilson, the symbolism of freedom. Ben, the inherent inscrutability of other people. And me, what if he's dead?
I think they all work nicely together,
Some more positively than others, perhaps.
Yeah. I did really like with your version of this film, or this, I guess, story rather than film, that, because I think that twist, I guess, that there's a baby in the original film is such a big twist in that. But for yours, that's like kind of the inciting incident is the baby, right? From the beginning, the baby is important. So like you kind of brought that all the way forward. And so in the end, what I liked about the original is that the conflict of the baby becomes a way to end it on like a new blended family, whereas your film is already explicitly about how do you create a new blended family from the get-go. Like that's already a thing that people are thinking about. And there are so many versions of what families can look like. And you end on this house because this is what this family looks like. And it may be peculiar, but not that out of the ordinary anymore. Whereas maybe for Ang Lee's version, it's out of the ordinary, and that's why it's kind of like a fun twist. But here it's like, we have seen this before. We know people who have families like this. I really like that kind of, I guess, almost like mundaneness of the fact that this is possible, of a kind that we can see elsewhere in our lives.
This kind of gets at something that I find really interesting about these two films, is that the 1993 film is in many ways more subversive, right? Because of the time in which it was made. While like my version of the film is, I think it's less subversive, albeit gayer. And I think, it really has to do with just, it's a different world that we're living in. And so, there's something about making a film like this in 1993 that was like kind of shocking for people. And now I don't think it's as shocking anymore to do like a gay Asian rom-com, you know? But I think that that's also what, again, allowed me a certain sense of like freedom to reimagine. And I think that that's a freedom that I needed and was something cultivated by James Schamus to kind of give me that blessing. I really hope that people will, if they watch the 2025 version and they haven't seen the previous version, that they watch that and then kind of understand like this legacy and change. Because I do think it then gives you the opportunity to think about, well, 30 years from now, how is a queer film going to be different? You know, and that's hard to tell, but is a fun thought experiment.
Well, Eli didn't watch the original before watching yours.
True, because everyone else I knew would have seen it in the other order. So I was like, I'll be the black sheep. Sure.
That's fun. That's fun. What was that experience?
I think similarly to what I said towards the start of our conversation, it allowed me to view the movie more in conversation with your previous work. And, you know, I brought up that thing about Ang Lee's edit because to see the patience with which you film your characters and let them be, often in close-up, which reminded me a lot of Driveways especially, to see how Ang Lee will more often hold a shot in wide just felt like an interesting point of contrast and yet also similarity in that both of you give the characters time. And when you talk about being character-based or paying respect to the characters first, that time feels important to me and like a marker of your directorial style. But I loved it. They're both great movies.
Yeah, I'll say like, I think it's interesting to think about. It is pretty wild for me to say like, oh, I've directed 4 features at this point, you know, and within a 9-year period, I count myself very fortunate because I think that that's really difficult. But yeah, like I think I'm always going to have certain instincts, even if the genres are really different, even if there's a different creative or even business priority. I kind of can't deny what I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. I think it's also, for me, kind of interesting to see what I've reacted to, you know, like I loved making Driveways, but after Driveways, I was like, oh, I just don't want to work with a young child. And then I worked with a gaggle of 20s, 30s gay boys. And then I was like, oh, I don't want to do that anymore. You know, no, but for me, it's like, it's nice to be able to try something different. And with this film, it's like, it was incredibly exciting to be able to dive into some subject matter that I feel like I hadn't been able to in my previous work. You know, that's very top of mind for me as a queer person who's thinking about marriage and kids. And so, you know, kind of Trojan horsed those themes in a rom-com for people to watch. And that for me, yeah, like it's just it's definitely part of a journey for me as a filmmaker. And I feel very gratified that there's a connection between them all.
Another connection that I'm thinking about is that in your lead performances, you're often giving an actor who's not had their due in the spotlight or in a lead role where they can really shine that platform. Hong Chow in Driveways, Bowen Yang and Joel Kim Booster in Fire Island. I think especially Kelly Marie Tran here.
Kelly Marie Tran! I will shout her name. She's incredible. She's so good at this movie.
I love Kelly, and I think she's such a special actress who is able to, you know, navigate some really tricky things. I think she's so stupid funny in this movie, but also devastating, right?
Agreed, yes.
And kind of angry. And I just love what she was able to do and kind of show her range in this film. I think part of this for me is being drawn to films and screenplays and stories where your protagonist might not necessarily be kind of a classic leading man. It's even as simple, I think, as just continuing to make Asian American films, and that I think a lot of people still don't see Asian Americans as the main characters in stories. It's a really tricky thing, I think, for filmmakers to tell Asian American stories at a certain level. For me, it's like, how do I make an Asian American film if like Steven Yeun doesn't have a role in the film? Like, who's like one of the few, I think, quote unquote, green lightable actors, you know, that the industry considers, right? For me, like that was part of the reason, again, why with the Wedding Banquet, I was like, okay, let me think of an ensemble, right? Like, how can I just collect great people so that maybe one person wouldn't necessarily be enough, but like, look at this great group of actors, you know? And I'm so in love with this ensemble. They're all really different, actually, you know, like their personalities, the kind of vibe and the energy, but they play off each other so beautifully. And there's a real kind of lived in quality. And I think that there was just this spirit of generosity that they all had with each other. But yeah, like I really love being able to give actors opportunities that they may not have had before, you know, and be able to show off a different side of who they are, you know, and hopefully that leads to other projects in the future.
Can you talk more about like casting this group? Because you got a all-star cast here, right? And you're topping it off with like two Asian screen legends, like with Joan Chen and Youn. How did that come together?
Yeah, you say that Steven Yeun is like a bankable Asian American star, but I feel like Joan Chen and Yuh-jung are both like bankable Asian American stars of their own right.
I'm so happy with how the casting went. Our casting director, Jenny Ju, when we had our first conversation, it really was just like, okay, how do we put this kind of Avengers team of, you know, Asian American talent together? Like for the matriarchs, Yuh-jung, I thought of immediately just because of her presence, her humor. What she did in Minari is incredible. So when we approached her, she was very honest and said, you know, I'm a little old to be mom, which was how the character was first written. And so she said, what do you think about like me playing grandma? And I kind of loved that. And it offered some additional opportunity dramatically and was kind of no-brainer if she wanted to do it, that I would make that change. You know, Joan, we had a first conversation about the screenplay, and we actually talked mostly about family, you know, and talked about motherhood and understanding how to support your children and how sometimes that doesn't necessarily align with how your children want to be supported, you know? And, you know, it's very open, honest conversation. You know, I talked about my relationship with my mother, and after that conversation, Joan sent me an email being like, oh my God, we didn't talk about the script at all, really. And I said, actually, you know, we did. It's just we were talking more about our own lives, and I think that that's great. Like Bowen, I just knew would nail that character. We've talked so much about, you know, again, that kind of millennial indecision, burden of choice. And I just really knew he could ground that within a character and still be so immensely charming and likable. You know, that was an easy call to make, you know, because of Fire Island. Lily Gladstone, it's so interesting. We had a meeting scheduled for the day after the Golden Globes.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, she's going to win her Golden Globe, and then she's going to party, and then she's going to cancel our meeting. You know? And then she won the Golden Globe, and I was like, okay, so she's going to cancel. And then the next day, the meeting was confirmed, and I went to meet her a couple hours later, and I was like, I brought her flowers because I was like, you just won a Golden Globe. And told her I would have fully understood if she wanted to postpone the meeting. And she told me, like, awards are nice, but at the end of the day, she's an actor and she wants to go back to work. And she loved the script and wanted to meet. And she's just such a real one, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, Kelly for Angela, like that was a really complicated role. And there's just so much inner turmoil. And I felt like Kelly really understood what was happening within Angela to Angela. And I think part of that was her own coming out process. Before the film, she wasn't publicly out, and now she is. And I feel like there was just a lot that she was personalizing in this really beautiful way. And then Ki-chan, our actor from Korea, I'll say this, like, it was kind of down to him and one other actor. And the other actor had golden retriever energy.
Oh, okay.
But Ki-chan, I was like, he's a poodle. He has poodle energy. And I think that that's this character, you know, like kind of vicious, but like beautiful and fancy. And I really believed in him. I'd seen him in some other shows in Korea, these BL shows, and I thought he was so lovely in them. And we had a really wonderful conversation. And so, you know, it all just kind of came together in this. People say like things happen for a reason. And I really believe that with the Wedding Banquet.
It's really nice seeing somebody like Glasnow, who usually has like more serious roles, like very, very serious roles, do something much lighter. And I guess almost more like, what's the word, more quotidian almost. And see her show range in that sense. Because I feel like we always think of acting as like good acting as being very serious, but good acting is also just like being normal. You know, like how do you just be a human? Like that's actually much harder than being serious or like trying to find a killer or something. You know what I mean?
I think that's so true. Just to like be present and in the moment and alive is so, it's so tricky. And I often think of awards. Sometimes I don't think of them as like best, but like most, you know, like instead of best editing, sometimes it's just like the most editing, right?
Yep.
Or like, is this the best actor or is it just like the most acting? And I get that most is often a real challenge and can be a real show of what you're capable of, but I do love a really subtle performance. And I think it just really adds to that feeling that like, oh, these are real people that exist somewhere. And, you know, Lily has done such beautiful work over the years, you know, like Certain Women, she's killer in it. You know, she's so good. She kind of steals the movie for me.
She does,
you know, and there's some incredible actors in that film. But yeah, like I just had so much faith that Lily would rock this part. And just getting to meet her, she has such a dry sense of humor. You know, she's so funny, goofball actually in real life. And I was like, oh, like you're gonna be great in this. And so it's fun for me to kind of imagine these actors in something that maybe people don't expect. But yeah, I would work with all of these actors again, you know, at some point.
Wedding Banquet 2.
I don't know what that would be. You know?
I love what you said about most acting awards, because I think one moment that really shines for me where the actors aren't really doing much is that reuniting scene at the end with Angela and Lee in the garden where no dialogue is exchanged between both of them, but you just cut between two of them like looking at each other and changing their reactions to each other until they're on the same page and they like embrace. And I think that's such an incredible scene that you directed there and really just made me tear up watching it. And you do it in such a simple way without any dialogue. I just want to hear from you what the whole thought process behind like coming up with that scene and also just working with the actors to bring that performance.
And I'll add working with Gerard Brisson as well, because the timing of that shot reverse shot,
Yeah, that was a rewritten scene during pre-production. The original reuniting between those two characters happened outside of City Hall, immediately following the marriage. And it was this feeling that I wanted to bring the characters back home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like this is a film about home. And part of it was, you know, not finding a location that I felt like was special enough. We were looking for like a City Hall exterior, and nothing felt like the proper place to see these two characters. And so we set it in the garden, which for me is kind of this symbol of stewardship, you know, planning for the next generation. And I just thought about, what could they say to each other? We know these two people are meant to be together. And more than anything, it was about kind of witnessing. That was what I cared about. You know, I was a full disaster on set because I just was crying because I thought what they were doing was so beautiful. And I remember after one take, Lily Gladstone was like, "Are you crying again?" And I was like, "Yes, I'm sorry." But, you know, like I love that in that shot when they finally embrace that there's kind of these like tendrils of hair that you kind of, you're like, is that Lily's hair? Is that Kelly's hair? And, you know, like they just kind of become one in this really beautiful way. And the way that the two of them say, "I love you, I love you, I love you," which is kind of just this like special thing for them that like we kind of purposefully dotted in the film, but is kind of under articulated. Like we didn't want to like make it a shtick for the audience. I wanted it to be a private thing between these two characters. And then, yeah, the editing, I've worked with Giraud Bresson before on a TV show called This Close, created by Shoshana Stern and Josh Feldman. And I loved Giraud's sense of cinema, and he's such a performance-driven editor. And that sequence, you know, it was one of those things where it actually came together really quickly. And I don't think we made adjustments to that for months. You know, once we found it, we found it. And it was really just looking for these moments where these two characters really see each other, are really kind of bearing themselves to each other. And I remember getting notes, you know, and feedback where people are like, "Add score here." And Giraud was like, no. Fucking that's why I wanted to work with him, you know, again. Because he was like, "Why do you need it? Like, you just have to hear the garden and you have to hear their voices, their breathing." And I really love that we have our rom-com ending with Chris and Min. And then we have this very intimate moment between Angela and Lee. Like, you know, I think that it's just, it shows the range of gay life, you know. It's that kind of dynamic range that I was really interested in capturing for the film.
I think definitely we really love that range. And I think that's the thing that really makes it stand out from the original. The ability to be like, okay, this is what that looks like now today.
You know, I'll say, like, I think our film is goofier than, you know, Ahng's movie, for sure, you know. And I think some of that is, I think, like, what a modern day rom-com looks like. I think it's also just, like, a bit of my sense of humor. It's the actors I was working with and taking cues from, like, what makes them special. In the edit, Giraud and I really had to find the tone of this in the way that the tone of the original film. And honestly, like, all of Ahng's work is so spot on, right? Like, it feels so right and consistent. They're so beautifully directed. And so, yeah, you know, I just think there's always a fine tuning in tone, from writing, directing, to editing, to scoring, color correction. Like, all of that is adding up to kind of creating something that you hope just like feels like a singular perspective, a lens with that you're seeing the world. And that I think it's the hardest thing in filmmaking, to make sure that there's that kind of clarity, that beauty in perspective.
You mentioned the color correcting, and the green here instantly made me think about the green in Fire Island surrounding the house that they stay in together. Another through line across your work. Actually, Driveways comes to mind as well. It feels like a very vivid, full, alive green.
I think for me, like landscape is so important, and having some sense of where you are in the world in these films. And my original, screenplay with James, was set in Los Angeles, actually, because this is, where I grew up. But then we couldn't afford to shoot in LA because it's so expensive.
Oh, man.
And so we ended up deciding to shoot in Vancouver. And it really was kind of, well, we either shoot in Vancouver or we can't shoot, just don't have the budget. And I wanted to make this movie. And then, especially since Bowen's character was like a birder, right? We're going to be out in the woods. I was like, I want to be able to embrace the natural landscape of the Pacific Northwest. And so I made the change to Seattle. I kept it an American city because of, the kind of immigration green card stuff. But that switch kind of unlocked the movie for us in a weird way, it actually kind of made a lot more sense, that Bowen was a birder and Kelly's character is like an environmental researcher, an entomologist. It just kind of started to click, and then Lily Gladstone is from Seattle. And I think she really loved that connection to her family history. And so this was what was meant to be. And I think as long as you're really listening to the process and your collaborators, and you can make the adjustments, you can really let the film kind of become what it wants to be, instead of kind of fighting it and then ending up with something that feels a little disjointed or not of itself. And so every step of the process, I was kind of looking at this film and being like, what is it? What do you want to be? And was very happy for my producers and James and my department heads to really offer all of their perspectives so that we could find one that really made sense.
The other thing about it not taking place in a New York City or a Los Angeles is that there's the popular stereotype of the gay story being set in a big urban center. There's something about it being in this really lovely suburban space that says to me, no, actually, this is just a part of the fabric of American life now. And I think especially right now, that feels like a useful flag to plant. And an empathetic one.
Yeah. Queer people are everywhere. We're everywhere. I imagine later in my career, I'll get to tell another LA story at some point. This one belongs where it belongs, I think Seattle was the Pacific Northwest was the right place. And weirdly, made it, again, kind of more personal, just kind of coincidentally, it's my boyfriend was born in Seattle. He lived many years of his life in the Pacific Northwest in Vancouver. There was just something about it all just kind of made sense, There's the very funny story of Lily. Her character originally was named Liz, and she told me, I feel weird about playing a lesbian named Liz. She said it's too on the nose. She told me about how her friends, the queer community, it's you end up dating someone that has a similar name, and she was like, there's Angela. And then she thought of the name Angeline, who is the name of Chief Seattle's daughter, Princess Angeline, and Chief Seattle being the Duwamish chief that Seattle is named after. And so what if it's Angela and Angeline, but like Angeline just goes by Lee for, short. And I was like, oh, that's beautiful. Like, yeah, that's great. And so it was Angela and Lee. And then one of our producers, was like, oh, I love that nod to the original. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, Angela and Lee, Ang Lee. And I was like, oh God, no. Like we didn't do that on purpose at all. And somehow it just happened. And so like, again, it just kind of felt like, well, maybe this was what it was supposed to be then,
That's so sweet. Were you ever thinking about doing a cameo in the film like Ang Lee does in the original?
I was obsessed with trying to get Ang to be a cameo in our movie. He was too busy, but am I in the film? I'm trying to think actually.
Wait, are you?
I don't think I am. I think the film is in some ways like so intensely personal that like I actually, if anything, needed to build some distance between me and the movie. But, like I was in a scene in Spa Night with dialogue and I hated my performance so much that I cut myself out of the movie and then kind of caused like a big continuity error. But I was like, whatever, like we're just going to go with it because I hated my performance. I don't need to put myself in my movies. Like, it's fine. It's fine. I don't need to do that. I don't think I'm in any of my films. Thank God. Thank God.
You're like the anti Hitchcock. You're nowhere to be seen.
Yeah. I already find like my films, again, kind of weirdly personal in ways that I don't feel the need to kind of literally put my image in it. But yeah, like I also like understand like, yeah, just being able to like have fun on set. And if there's a reason in the future, I'll do it.
Talking about Ang Lee, has he seen your movie?
So at least as of this recording, he has not watched the movie yet. He's been incredibly supportive. And from the get-go, like I remember that first pitch with Anita, James Schamus had sent me like a video message from Ang, wishing me luck.
Oh, wow.
And it's a very funny video message because they're like at a restaurant and Ang is like eating soup at the same time. And he's been, incredibly supportive throughout the process. I think we'll show him the film like when he has the time. He's been a very busy person. But yeah, that is like the one audience where I'm just like, oh God, like that makes me nervous. But again, I think because the film really is its own thing, I think he'll be very, hopefully, happy. But, he's such a role model for me. And I find his body of work so incredible. And I think what he does cinematically is just so beautiful. It's so impressive. It feels so alive. But yeah, that Father Knows Best trilogy, come on, that's like the best first 3 films someone could make, I love them all for very different reasons. But yeah.
For sure. It was my first time watching Eat, Drink, Man, Woman like in my life. And I was like, why have I...
Wait, really? Like
this week?
Last week?
This week. Yeah, like a few days ago. And I like finished it. I was like, what the hell? Like this is close to a perfect movie. All 3 sisters just give fantastic performances. It is, incredible. Do you have an urge to remake that? No, maybe not.
But. Oh no! What are you doing? No, why? I could not.
No, you got to remake Gemini Man.
I mean, sure, yeah. No, I think Eat, Drink, Man, Woman is such a beautifully crafted film. So many characters. The plate spinning is so smart. So much humor. The most epic food sequence at the beginning.
Yes.
I love that kind of himbo volleyball coach, like he's so great. Like if you're really talking about family drama and kind of emotional insight, what Aang accomplished in those films is mind-boggling,
Yeah.
I mean, Eat, Drink, Man, Woman was remade,
Wait, was it?
Yeah. That film, Tortilla Soup,
Oh my God,
I think
what?
is a remake of Eat, Drink, Man,
No
Woman.
way. That's a great movie. Oh, I Googled tortilla soup and it just gives me recipes, of course.
I think actually, like, I get why it could be made in other cultures, for sure. But, I think for me, I'm going to lay off a remake, at least for the next film. I'll think of something either original or maybe like based on like a book or IP. But I'm very thankful for Aang supporting this one. I'm not going to push my luck on another.
Well, back to your film, I want to talk about like cinematography specifically, because I feel like with this film, especially with like this scene, like the wedding banquet scene, there's just this one shot where you're tracking behind Angela as she enters into a room, and it like, I was like, wow, this is a big like cinema moment. He's probably on a crane. The camera's tracking forward and going up at the same time. And I was like, wow, this is a movie. Like how do you feel about, I guess, just like leveling up with the tools that you have cinematographically with this film or in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm always trying to stay true to the moment and never feel like the cinematography is doing something for coolness sake. And, my cinematographer for the wedding banquet, Ki-jin Kim, was also my cinematographer for Driveways and Spa Night. And we're always talking about an honesty and never wanting to feel like the cinematography is inauthentic to the scene. And there are certain set pieces where we could play and have fun and try something goofy or have more scale or scope, like at the Korean wedding. And then there were times where we just had to be super honest. And we talked a lot about, Ozu. There's the scene between Joan Chen and Yuh-jung having dinner. And we really loved the kind of honest singles that we got with them. And we shot a wide shot, of course, and that's in the film. But there's a 2-shot, that we actually didn't end up using because we really loved just being able to cut back and forth between them. Where, it's like these characters, they don't have anything to hide from each other. And that was really important. So I think we just really wanted something that felt human. One of our references that we talked about for the cinematography was Perfect Days. There was just something about like the color and the image and the lighting where it just had to feel a part of these people's lives. We didn't want to impose an aesthetic. Instead, it had to really feel like the aesthetic was born out of the world that these characters live in. And it's very subtle, but I think it's an important priority that we established in thinking about the look of the film.
Do you have like a favorite moment from set, from making it?
My favorite moment from making the film, the Korean wedding was really special for me, because I'm really interested in ritual. I remember going to my brother's wedding and he had that traditional Korean ceremony and he had to like carry his wife on his back around the room. And they did that thing with the chestnuts and the jujubes. And I wondered, as a queer person, could I ever have this? Could I participate in these traditions? And I saw how my brother got closer to my parents, how my brother got closer to his wife, got closer to his Korean identity because of this. And it felt really unfair that I might not be able to participate. And so it was a big part of the reason why I wanted to make this film, was to show this Korean ceremony. And when we shot it that day, I remember setting up the altar with our production design team, and then the actors coming down for the first rehearsal, and they were all wearing their hanboks. And I just kind of lost it because I realized that I planned this so that I could have my own Korean wedding, and it just kind of hit me in that moment. And I think for me, part of the film was trying to just kind of queer it in some ways, like that scene with the chestnuts and the jujubes. Some of these traditions actually, we've kind of lost sight of maybe the origins of it. And I think that means we can adapt them, right? And the end, when Chris's cousin Kendall says, it's like, oh, they'll have 15 non-binary children. It's like, how can I just make this a little gay, right? I was very happy about that. But that sequence, we shot at that location for 2 days, and there was just a lot personal about it, that made it feel really special. And, my parents were on set. So that felt really cool. It's funny, even my dad did not know which ones were the sons and which ones were their daughters, the chestnuts or the jujubes. He got it wrong, actually. He thought he knew the answer, and then he Googled it and he was wrong. But yeah, so many reasons why that was a very special and also, difficult thing for me to shoot. And, I'm glad that I got to do it.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
I have a question coming off of that. And I'm a believer in the idea that art making in most any form can be a kind of diary keeping, or it can reflect or refract what's happening in your life. And you're talking about how conversations with your boyfriend, your relationship with your brother, with your parents, filtered their way into the movie. I also think that the act of writing in a diary or art making as diary can shape what goes back out into your life and how you navigate from there. If it's not too personal a question to ask, and please feel free to say if it is, how has making this movie shaped any of those relationships for you, or how you navigate after production?
I mean, I'll answer the question the best way I think I can. I agree with you that, we as filmmakers do put a lot of ourselves in our films, and then it's only natural that it somehow affect us in our lives again, somehow, that the film makes an impact. And I think about how, it's like my boyfriend got to see the film at Sundance for the first time. And I think that inspired a very honest and very long conversation that was really important for us as a couple. The night of the premiere, when I was exhausted, but that's going to be a conversation and a memory that I really cherish forever. But, I think more than maybe the film offering answers to some of the questions that I feel like I was posing in the film, it's more that the film offered me kind of the space and time to think about these things and understand how I might want to be a husband, how I might want to be a parent, be more intentional about them in a way that maybe before the film, I just had the kind of desire or the feeling, and now I have a better sense of how I might actually do it because I kind of imagined the future. It's interesting, with, even my short film, Dole First Birthday, that was weirdly kind of a future imagining more than it was a lived past experience, And that was kind of the Wedding Banquet too, It was kind of a future imagining, what my life might look like in a couple of years. And I think for a lot of queer people, when we talk about family, it's sometimes hard to imagine what that looks like, And so that was my making this film, was a kind of an attempt at what might this look like? I remember the first time in the edit where I felt like the movie was working was when you hear the babies cry. And I just was I I'm so glad they have babies.
Yeah.
Like that was like my first thought. And so it's an interesting combination of inspirations, and some of it is lived experience and some of it is kind of wish fulfillment in a way.
On this thread, I was particularly touched by that scene between Min and his grandma, where she's in his studio and she's looking at the artworks that he's made, and she's talking about how he's been able to like stitch together a family of his own without her support. And that like broke me. Like that was a very tender moment, but I think bringing it to the ending where this family unit is still together and raising kids sort of just reaffirms this found family that Min has made around him. And I just like love that thread that you made in the film with Min and his grandma. It was just very heartwarming. Thank you. It's not a question, but yeah.
Thank you. I'll say like that scene between Min and his grandma was really inspired by the artwork. And we found this artist, Julia Kwan, who used this patchwork technique that's very traditional to talk about modern issues in society, in identity. And it was so inspiring to think about that as this catalyst for this conversation and how it might tie into the lives of these characters. Again, like there was just something that felt so, kismet about it all. That was the first scene that we shot with Yuh-jung.
Wow.
Like she was like, wow, we're really starting off hard. But was so up for the challenge. And it was very fun. We shot the first take of that scene the first time we were working with her, and I came up to her and I was like, that was lovely. Like, can we go again? And she said, if it was really lovely, we wouldn't have to go again.
Oh my God.
And I was so like caught. And, she said to me, she was like, you don't have to be nice. Like you could just like give me the note. American directors are so nice. Like you don't have to give me the compliment, And that really like calmed me down actually. Like I was like, okay, that's great. Like she's such a legend. And I really love the tenderness of that scene. And I think it really pulls in kind of everything around the film and what we're trying to say with the movie.
I really like knowing that scene was their first together, because it makes that gesture of love and acceptance feel inevitable in a metatextual kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about like having that love as an experience that then, when they do the other scenes, like that's in there somewhere. Because I think that's important amongst all the kind of drama and conflict. But yeah, it only worked out that way because of the schedule.
Every schedule happens for a reason.
It does.
I think you have to kind of think that way as a filmmaker, that you have to take advantage with what's given and find how you could make that work for you, as opposed to fighting it or resenting it. I just don't think that leads to good filmmaking. The best filmmakers are the ones that, when presented with a challenge, end up making it feel like a choice, instead of a restriction. And so that's something that it's intensely difficult to really make that work for you. But like, I'm always thinking like, how can I make the best of this? Like, what gifts am I being given that I just need to like highlight and emphasize and celebrate?
Thank you. I think that's a great note to end this interview on.
Celebration.
Yeah.
Celebration.
Thank you so much for your time, Andrew. It was really a great conversation.
Agreed.
Yes.
I'm always happy to chat with you all, and I'm thankful that y'all are up so early.
Anything for you, Andrew.
It is our honor.
Thank you. What other episodes are coming up?
I mean, by the time this is out, they'll be out already, but we're currently wrapping up our Edward Young retrospective for us. So we're finishing up with That Day on the Beach and Brighter Summer Day, and also doing the latest Wallace and Gromit. And,
What a pivot.
and also you mentioned Reichardt's Certain Women. We're covering Meek's Cutoff.
Amazing.
So that's already recorded. It's going to come out soon.
Yeah, we have quite a big backlog.
No, that's awesome. Very, very cool. The films that you guys are covering. I love that Wallace and Gromit is in there. That's so... The new one, or
Yeah, so we've covered the other ones.
Oh.
Yeah.
We've already done those. Yeah. It's 'cause it's Eli's origin story. It's why he's like
Yes.
this.
Yes.
That's why he looks like he's made of clay.
oh my god,
Cheese.
You cut him open, it's cheese and clay.
Oh my God. Yeah, well, kind of.
hilarious. I love that you guys made that Instagram post with all of you wearing the "I told you" shirts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's from when. So that was like the first time the three of us were together physically in like 6 years.
Since we started the
Wow.
podcast.
That was behind this door.
Oh my god, look at the giant Poor Things poster.
Oh, yeah. She's just staring at me as I sleep.
I'll tell you, because of Fire Island, Searchlight had invited me to a feedback screening for Poor Things.
Oh.
And, there was a screening, and then there was like a questionnaire, and then there was like a conversation. And afterwards, I went up to the Searchlight execs and I was like, wow, like, is Lanthimos going to take notes? And they're like, no. Like, they have to do this for the process because it's kind of a formality. And they were like, Lanthimos is gonna Lanthimos, and I'm pretty certain that like what I saw ended up being, I think it was basically the final cut of the film.
Wow.
But yeah, I guess when you like win people Oscars and stuff, like you get to have final cut on your movies, Well, thank you, again for taking some time and watching the movie. And when it comes out, let me know. I'll
Yeah.
post it and stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Andrew, for coming on the podcast today and also for this film. I hope everyone goes out and goes to the theater to catch it on April 18th. Is it 18th?
April 18th.
April
Yeah.
18th on 1,500 screens in the States.
Yeah.
If you are living outside of the US, you have to be patient. Just be patient.
Yeah. Just hope. I don't know when.
Yeah, we'll figure out like kind of international stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, a big thank you to Andrew Ahn and the folks at Bleecker Street for giving us this interview.
Thanks, Miranda.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Deep Cut. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating because that helps others discover the show. A great way to support us is to leave a review for us on Apple Podcasts or comment on our episodes directly on Spotify if you have thoughts about the movie or this interview. Be sure to subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts so you'll know when our next episode drops. You can keep up with Deep Cut on Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd at Deep Cut Pod and TikTok at DeepCutPod_film. You can also join us to talk about movies on our Discord server. We have a Patreon if you want to support us. We deeply appreciate it. You can click the link in our description or go to deepcutpod.com to find our Patreon, Discord, and all the other socials that we've mentioned here. A special shout out to our Patreon Deep Cut Pick supporter, Leah Lai. Without you, we cannot do the show. Deep Cut is hosted and produced by us, Wilson Lai, Benjamin Yap, and Eli Sands. Our cover art is designed by Justina Yam, and our theme song is composed by the one and only Eli Sands. I'm Wilson.
I'm Ben.
I'm Eli.
And I'm Andrew.
Take care, and we're looking forward to talking about more movies with you next time.